George the Tech.
Hi, everybody. How's it going today? Thanks for tuning in for my Audacity advanced class. All right, so our scope for today, what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about optimizing your Audacity layout for VoiceOver. That's a topic that I threw in there because there's some ways to customize the layout to be more useful to you. Comparing recording techniques. People wanted to know, when should I use the clicker, dog clicker method, or finger snap or mouth click method, versus how do I do punch and roll recording? And then we're going to look at multi-track recording and how they're all different ways of recording your voice and how they differ in terms of some are non-destructive, meaning that audio gets replaced when you do it, and some are non-destructive, meaning the audio that you previously recorded remains until afterward. Okay. Then we'll look at noise floor. What is it, and how do you measure it? Actually, this question triggered a heck of a discussion on my email chain. I have an email going with all the top tech colleagues in the business. There's been a very interesting array of responses about doing this. I have my methods and I'll share them with you. FX plugins, special effects plugins that create changes in tone. We'll look at what is included with Audacity, but we'll also mention what is kind of missing from Audacity, what is not available to you to use, what is lacking in the built-in and additional free Nyquist plugins that you can get through Audacity's website. What would you consider adding in? And probably one of the most popular add-on plugins by far is Isotope RX. And I'll show a little bit and explain why. Next up, building macros. We're going to show a step-by-step of how I would build a typical macro. Macros are sequences of plugins they used to be called chains, actually in version 2 of Audacity. And I'll show how I build a typical macro. And as I mentioned in the chat, if anybody would like to provide a sample of their audio, some audition they recorded recently, all I ask is that you didn't do any of your own processing. Normalizing, fine, but it should be otherwise unprocessed audio. Just put a share link to it in the chat and I'll use it. And that way you'll have a macro at the end built with your voice. Next, we'll go into how to use a macro to do a batch conversion or batch convert many files in a single click. So you don't have to just apply a macro to the project you're working on. You can apply it to a bunch of files. And that's a nice way to speed things up dramatically. All right, next up, we're going to look at what it means to master audio. Mastering basically means controlling the overall volume output of the audio. Also, the quality that also falls into play. How good or bad does it actually sound? But mastering, mostly in the context of a voiceover project, has to do with controlling the overall volume, sometimes called the RMS and sometimes called the LUFS, which is the new method of measuring loudness units full scale. So we'll be looking at what are we listening for, because listening is a key part to doing any processing. How do we know when it sounds right? What are we listening for again? What does it sound? When does it sound right? How do I know I got it right? Why use macros at all? Can I just load plugins? What's the point? And controlling things like noise. Let's say the noise floor you measured in your setup is not optimal. What can we do about that? We'll talk about ways to reduce sibilance. If you have strong S's, how do you control that? And things like spikes in the dynamic range. So when you hit a certain word a little bit too hard in the script, so that the level on that word jumps up really high and the rest of them are lower, What's the best way to deal with that? Using dynamics control, aka compressors. Then we'll go on to mastering specifically for audiobooks and talk about what's unique about that. Mastering for podcasts. If you're going to reduce or produce a podcast, how would you set your mastering goals, or what are the goals there in terms of mastering for podcasts? Then we'll get into advanced settings and menu options. Basically, what else do you want to know at that point? And that's where we'll just get into our Q&A, and we'll spend some time going through like anything about the software, the user interface, anything you want to know that's going to help make your life better and smoother when using Audacity. So first, let's talk about optimizing the layout of Audacity, right? So you can control what is seen where on the screen. You don't have to just leave the default layout exactly as you see it. You can move things around and manipulate the way you see things on the screen. And the way that's done, and by the way, this is the way I tend to rearrange the user interface of Audacity to my liking, right? But this is a very subjective thing. You can completely customize the layout, do whatever you like, and make it look the way you want it to look, which is really nice. So again, you can refer back to this later if this is the way you want to make your layout look. You've got a reference to look at. But let's take a look at Audacity on this computer, and let's see how it's different and how I might rearrange what I see on my Audacity to match this Audacity or get close to it. So what I like to do is I want to maximize my usable editing space in here. This gray box in the center, this is where audio ends up being stored and recorded. And I want to maximize the amount of real estate dedicated to seeing my audio waveform. I want to see as much detail as possible, right? So by laying out the screen in the way that I was showing you in the prior slide, or you can do a variation on that theme, which is the way I have it laid out here, you're really going to be maximizing your usable space. And this is a key thing to being efficient and being able to make detailed decisions about edits that you're going to make in your audio, right? So one thing that I really like to do is have the playback timer, which right now I have at the very bottom of the screen. I like to have that out of the way. I don't need to have it right in front of my face. But if you like to have the playback timer more visible, you can just grab the little handle. There's a handle right next to it. It looks like a row of little dashed lines. You can grab that handle, click, and drag it elsewhere in the interface. Now, here's the thing. Because this timer uses 2 rows of buttons, it won't fit everywhere, right? It's only going to fit where you have room for that double height tool. So with my layout, it actually will fit very nicely right up here next to my editing toolbar, right? But that's how you can move things around. Look for the little row of lines, the little handle. It's basically a handle. Drag things in the position where you like it and get it the way you like it. I actually prefer my meter to be a lot more detailed as well. Just like I like my waveform to be large and fill the screen, I like my playback meter to be as large as possible. So to do that, I'm going to put it down here at the bottom where I can expand it and make it fill as much of the screen as possible. So I put my mouse over the right edge of the view meter till the pointer turns into a move tool. And now I can drag that all the way out. So now I can see where audio ends up being stored and recorded. You can see way more detail in my level meter. Again, I find that helpful. I like to know not only what my peak levels are, which are indicated by the little tiny blue hash marks that are left behind in the view meter after you play audio, but I also like to be able to look at closely my room tone level and see where is my room tone falling on that meter. So that's why I like to see a lot of detail and put that meter right where it's visible. So put put it the way you like, can customize it the way you like. If there's any tools you don't actually want to see, you can control that. You can actually go up to the view area, go to toolbars, and uncheck anything you don't want to see. So if you want to clean up the interface a lot, you can do that. For example, if you're never going to look at the input output level controls, like I never touch those things because I control my input level from my interface, my audio recording interface, and I control the output monitor level from my level control also on my interface, right? So I don't need to see the mixer toolbar. I can uncheck that and it goes away. Okay.